What if the guilt from a past mistake places you in such a personal hell that it becomes nearly unescapable? I'm Dre, and this is The Midnight Hour. Tonight, we are going to be looking at the novelization of Silent Hill 2 by Sadamu Yamashita. Now, what makes this specific novelization a little bit special is that it was originally written and released in Japan. And though it never had a proper Western release, I specifically had this copy custom made from an online translation that I found and was able to kind of put it together so that I could read it as an actual book. Now, Silent Hill is a very revered survival horror game, and Silent Hill 2 especially is a fan favorite. A lot of people will argue that it is the best one of the series, and so that is the one that we are going to cover tonight. Now, the story revolves around a protagonist named James Sunderland, who is your everyday guy, and he's going through a lot because his wife, Mary, died 3 years ago from an unnamed disease. And the death was very hard on him. And recently, he's received a letter from her instructing him to meet her in the town of Silent Hill. So this is already a little bit strange for him. He can't make sense of it. But of course, anybody in his position would be lured into something like that, where you have a loved one who's passed and now you receive a letter from them. So he arrives in Silent Hill and immediately notices how off everything is. It is a fog-laden town. Nobody is around. It's abandoned. It's completely emptied out of any souls other than him. And he wanders the streets a little aimlessly at first until he takes sight of the first monster, and then the second, and then the third. So the player of the game or the reader of the book is immediately thrust into this otherworldly type vibe with James, and we are walking through his adventure with him, and it is full of monsters, dangers, and finally meeting some interesting characters along the way. Now, because of all of this turmoil that James eventually goes through, he comes to the conclusion that Silent Hill, the town, has begun to manifest his deepest feelings about loss and about hatred and even about guilt itself. So we're not going to cover the entire story here because there are so many spoilers and so many plot lines that it wouldn't make sense to cover in a single episode. But what we are going to cover is that manifestation that Silent Hill does to people who visit it, and whether or not it's something awful or horrifying, that is really up to the individual visitor of the town. Now, this may not make a lot of sense right off the bat, but we're going to go into 3 sections of this novelization that may shed a little bit of light on it. The first part we're going to look at is when James comes across a memo written by a doctor at Brookhaven Hospital. And it is basically a memo written about a patient that resided at the hospital for a while. And James basically just reads it and reflects on it, and it says, "The potential for this illness exists in all people, and under the right circumstances, any man or woman would be driven, like him, to the other side. The other side, perhaps, may not be the best way to phrase it. After all, There is no wall between here and there. It lies on the borders where reality and unreality intersect. It is a place both close and distant. Some say it isn't even an illness. I cannot agree with them. I'm a doctor, not a philosopher or even a psychiatrist. But sometimes I have to ask myself this question. It's true that to us, his imaginings are nothing but the inventions of a busy mind. But to him, there simply is no other reality. Furthermore, he is happy there. So why, I ask myself, why in the name of healing him must we drag him painfully into the world of our own reality? That was the memo, and then this is James reflecting on it. It seemed to be more of the doctor's personal opinion regarding the patient's mental illness rather than an actual medical diagnosis. Who was the patient these papers referred to? Could it be talking about me? James shuddered, but instantly rejected the idea. No, that can't be it. But all the strange things happening in Silent Hill, the vanishing people, the weird monsters, all those things that are just too wild for someone to just imagine. Again, he shook his head in denial. Maybe the reality was just as absurd as the fantasy. So what I get from that is when talking about madness and taking all of the facets that it comes with into consideration, it isn't so black and white. It exists in all of these different shades of gray. And like the doctor's memo points out, there is no wall. There is no here and there. It is this constant flowing thing. Some people are closer to that place than others, but that doesn't mean that you're either here or there. Now, this is why Silent Hill, the town, can be both beautiful and horrifying. Throughout the game and throughout this novel, there are many instances where Silent Hill is painted as this beautiful and even luxurious tourist destination. A lot of people visit it to escape. But it just so happens that James visiting it has the opposite effect. He wants nothing more than to escape it. But until he finds Mary, he's not going anywhere. Now, the second section we're going to look at is one of the many, many instances where James finds something that shouldn't be there, like an opening, like a hatch in a floor. There is constant room shifting happening throughout the game, and it's just one of those disorienting things that it does with us. So the section goes, looking into the square opening in the floor, he found nothing but a gaping abyss. Gazing into the bottomless darkness, a thought drifted through James's mind. The blackness hiding inside this pit is like me. It might even be my destiny. It certainly is possible that I'm just holding on to a fantasy world. And surely a person that crazy is capable of believing that there's nothing wrong with himself at all. Any normal person could guess that, but it wasn't a guarantee. Just like how sometimes you realize that you're dreaming while you're still asleep. Maybe a madman could see through a delusion while still trapped inside it. Sometimes, depending on the amount of guilt we're talking about and someone's personal moral compass, they may very well come to the conclusion that they do deserve eternal damnation, eternal condemnation. And what I feel like James is saying with that passage is that the ability to step back and ask yourself, is this right? Is this normal? Still signals some sort of saneness. So that is how we relate to James throughout the story. We know something is off, and he knows something is off. So it's not like we are viewing this story through someone who completely is so disconnected from reality. Like, for instance, the narrator in Poe's The Telltale Heart, where that person is just so sure that he is the sane one and everyone else around him is insane. James realizes that something is off, and he knows that something may very well be off with him as well. Now, the third section that we're going to read is James coming to the realization that his ideas about Silent Hill were correct. They are manifesting something that only pertains to his journey specifically. And they are horrifying manifestations, but here is his moment of clarity, and it goes. At long last, he finally understood. These abnormalities were neither chaotic nor random. The true reason for the monsters that continued to block his path, it was all according to someone's will. But he had known that from the beginning. He just hadn't allowed himself to admit it. He had been clinging to a single hope, the desire to forget reality, even if it meant sealing away all those unpleasant memories. However, James wasn't creating everything by himself. By his own choice, he had allowed the town of Silent Hill to help build up the illusion. The place was an accomplice. That was the reason he'd been invited. Called to this town just like Eddie and Angela. They really were all the same. Fellow sinners all trapped in their own self-created nightmares. So what this is really saying to me is that there is a very real ability to turn one's surroundings, whatever they may be. It just so happens that this is the town of Silent Hill, into hell based solely upon one's own viewpoints. There is this ability to make hell out of heaven, even if you're living in the most beautiful place one could imagine. If your inner world is hell, you will find a way to make your outer world match it. Now, there's a flip side to that too. There are some people who can take living in a very dire situation, like a hellish situation, and make heaven out of it. Maybe it won't be 1000% heaven, but they can turn a negative situation positive just by their own projections of their inner world. Sadly, Silent Hill leans more toward the former example. The difference between hell and heaven in Silent Hill is the person visiting themselves. And Silent Hill is really a moral judge. And whatever you have been through and feel about your past and about yourself, Silent Hill will make certain that you come face to face with many conclusions that you'll reach throughout your horrific journey there. And at the end of the day, I feel like that's what really captures the audience's interest in this story. It's very rooted in reality, and we are so thankful when we put down that controller or we put down this book and just take a breath and just say, okay, this is why I don't want to hold on to guilt. This is why I don't want to hold on to hatred and anger, because it will manifest itself into something horrific in my life. Maybe it won't necessarily be deranged and deformed nurses and mannequins and whatnot, but it may end up ruining a lot of moments that otherwise could have been great had you gotten your inner world right. So that was our story for tonight. Like this video if you felt something. Comment with what you thought, and I will see you next Sunday at the midnight hour.